We've already committed with the funds that we've have in reserve, $50,000 to get the process started, get our space ready to go, get the lighting right, get the power light, get the tools in there that we need. But there's a heck of a lot more that we need to do to get the programming and the equipment and everything perfect. And that's what this fundraising campaign is all about. I can tell you as we sit here today, all members of the board, and there are 12 of us, as well as our 2 past presidents, 14 of us, have all committed and made donations to the fund so far. So the 100% commitment of the board on this effort. And we've raised a tidy sum towards our overall objective. Tom McCluskey, our finance director, is kind of coordinating and shepherding the donations as they come in. Jesse Smith, who may or may not be here tonight, I don't know whether he's online or not, is one of our volunteers in the organization who's coordinating that effort, along with Paul Ehrlich, our planning director, who actually lives in Minnesota. That's the commitment he made to the Guild. As he moved to Minnesota, he stayed as our planning director and is doing a hell of a job kicking everybody's butt, making sure that we get things done. But I'm asking you, all of you, to when you get that request, donate what you can, because it's really going to mean a lot to the future of the Guild. So with that bit of announcement out of the way, Tom.
Want to know how to donate?
Oh, yes.
Donate. Now, it's either through PayPal or look below it. It says take a credit card. You want to be anonymous, you write a check to the Guild, mail it, and put the website. That way. But the donations go, so wait for the letter.
Right. Anonymous is for those big donors who don't want to make, who don't want, any credit when that big $10,000 check comes in. So, feel free to write your checks. One of the things that we try to do each month is we try to go and spotlight one of our groups or activities in the Guild. On short notice, I asked Craig Jones, who is our coordinator for the CNC SIG, Special Interest Group, just to give a brief announcement about what that group is, when it meets, and how to get involved. So Craig, you want to come up here and take the mic so that people...
Whoa. Yeah, that is bright. That is one bright light.
Yay, Craig.
Yeah, turn it down a bit. CNC SIG is a group of probably, well, about 30 or 40 people who come when they can. Our meetings right now are all Zoom calls, and that's on the second Thursday of the month. And that's from 7 to 9 o'clock in the evening. The CNC, as some of you refer to me as the cheater, because this is not traditional hand tool, but in my mind, it's the right tool for certain jobs.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute him. Let's see. I gotta find the mute button. Mute all button.
Come over to give all of us a complete master class in Neapolitan style pizza making.
Can everybody please mute themselves that are zoomed in? We're getting a lot of crosstalk.
There we go.
Pizza in general. So I bought in the pizza and I just start to say
That's important stuff.
because I grew up from my mom,
okay.
4th generation pizza chef, from my father, 3rd generation pizza chef. Part of me. My first was
Love that technology. When you know where the button is. For all of us. That's
It was
the other thing.
apparently an old family recipe.
Okay, a CNC is computer controlled router, basically. And it allows you to do a variety of different things. Most of them probably can be done with traditional hand tools, but a lot of it is easier to do, I think, my opinion, easier to do on the CNC machine. If anybody is interested, I brought a couple of little projects. A couple of them are just work in process, things that I'm doing, cribbage boards, little boxes, and those kind of things. But the CNC user group, basically we get together, and not everybody has a machine, but the people who do talk about problems that they might have or how to do different things. And we typically have a little how-to meeting with how to do a particular thing, how to hold the pieces down, and a variety of different things. As I mentioned, and I don't know if you heard, I brought a couple of just little this and that projects that I've got in process at this point. And the guild does have a CNC machine. I need to get with Abu shortly, or maybe tonight, to talk a little bit about.
Unless you
Oh.
climb into that screen.
I'm not gonna climb into the screen, but I do need to talk to him. But we do have, the guild does have a CNC machine. With COVID, it has just sat dormant. Our plan is to put together a routine for some classes and how to do it. That's something that Ed and several of us are working on right now.
Most importantly is if you're interested and you have some teaching skills or you have some background in this, get with Craig, get with myself, and let's get it done. You know, we're all volunteers, so nothing happens unless we do it ourselves. So thanks very much, Craig.
Thanks.
Yay,
We're
CNC.
all volunteers, and this last, 2 weeks ago, I guess, Mother's Day weekend, we had one of the premier events that the guild participates in on a yearly basis, which is the gathering of the guild. And that event doesn't happen without a heck of a lot of volunteers and a lot of coordination. Roger Crooks and his team, Gary, your team, staff did a heck of a job staffing that event. But there's one individual who went above and beyond, and I'm going to ask Ed Ferguson to come up for a minute and present the Volunteer of the Month award to an individual who really helped out during the gathering of the guilds. And I actually have a brick here today to throw off.
Great. Okay. I suspect many of you do not know this individual. A lot of our volunteers are familiar faces, but this one has not been quite the presence that a lot of the members are here. He did wander into Project Builds early in 2018, and he was an affable, cheerful, energetic guy and was participating in Project Build with us. He also, at that time, he had recently retired. He's was a software engineer and entrepreneur, and he recently retired. And he also became involved in an organization that provides volunteer consulting services to small businesses and nonprofits. And the organization is called SCORE. But at any rate, that became an all-consuming project for him. So he kind of dropped out of sight for us for a while. But a few months ago, I got an email from Martin and said, say, what's going on? He wanted to catch up with the group here. And in the course of our conversation and exchange, he showed me some work he had been doing. And I'll just give you a teaser on it. He ended up showing it to the Project Build biweekly online session, and it really blew him away. And you're going to see it in July in the program here. So I won't say anything more about that. What we're really recognizing Martin for, Martin Blatch is his name.
Martin, can you come on up? We haven't actually had the opportunity to. You're gonna give it to him.
I'll show my face.
All right, good. So,
Thank you, Ed, for the kind words.
okay,
Get closer for the picture.
so
Gotta
Martin's,
get closer for the picture.
Oh, I see.
Martin's been stepping back in.
Give him the award. You're not, it's not yours.
All right. I was planning on doing that. All right,
It just changed.
all
I
right,
got a call coming. I'll take it.
all right. So in stepping back into guild activity, Martin said, well, how do I get involved with the gathering of the guilds? And he ended up in his usual enthusiastic manner, jumping in, and he volunteered for double sessions every day of the session. He brought some things to sell. He had a sale,
First sailing, first commission.
a sale and a commission. So at any rate, it's fun to see him again back with the guild, and let's congratulate him for his fine contribution. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. That's actually the first award that I've physically been able to hand to a recipient in more than 2 years. I have some more of those at the house, but I have about 30 of them yet to make. So all those people who got it during COVID, hang tight. We'll get them to you soon. You get to keep it. No, you get to keep that. Put that in your fireplace. So I understand we also have some show and tell tonight. Sure. Well, Ruth and John both brought some show and tell. I think you have to come up here under the spotlight. Can everybody up there still hear us on Zoom? Thumbs up if you can. I see a booge. Okay, thank you.
I was in Michael Cullen's class recently. Let's see, was it Make a Box class or something? And I brought my box, and I have to tell you, it was maybe the most fun I've had woodworking in years. We had such a good time. Michael had us outside of the box. Everything we did was something we hadn't done before. Try this, you haven't done it, it's different. We're painting wood. No, my God, we're not gonna paint wood. Yes, you're gonna paint wood. You're gonna do all kinds of different things to it. And we had such a good time. We cut the boxes apart. We textured and decorated the insides, put it back together, cut the outsides off, textured and painted the outsides, and made this spiffy little unusual thing that's fun to hold, fun to show, fun to have made. Can't say enough about what fun we had in Michael's class. I was on a high for a couple of weeks after that. We had such a good time. Then also I brought something else. So I've been working on exercising my hand tool skills and trying to practice and maybe think about things that might help people practice their hand tool skills. So I had a piece of pine that somebody left in the cutoff bin at the guild. So I did everything by hand, and I practiced making rabbits and shooting things and sawing them up and making a box. And it was a lot of fun. All hand tools, not a touch of sandpaper, not a touch of machine. I didn't dimension the wood. It was 3/4 inch pine, but I smoothed it at the end, and it was a lot of fun.
That Michael Cullum class that she talked about, when I read the description, I got scared away because I thought it was too much hand carving or carving, and I didn't really think that was my thing. I happened to walk into the class. I had to go to the guild shop and do something, and I was looking at all the people making these boxes, and I wished I had signed up for that class. So Don't let the description of something scare you away. Take that step and sign up, because I wish I would have taken that class after I've seen some of the products that came after it. John, your turn.
Okay, I've got a couple of things here. One is I did a little more development work on my laminated molar stool. I added an upholstered seat. The upholstered seat is based on a curved, I used the Italian poplar plywood, 1/8 inch, and then it's based on a curved base plate. And then it is, I have to put this down for a second. Where are you? Yeah. It's based on an arrangement that screws it down. There you go. Screws it down on the bottom with a couple of holes drilled so it lets the air out. The foam in it is called HR foam. It's high resiliency foam. So even though it's only 1-inch foam with a little Dacron on top, you don't bottom out in it. It's really, really sound. And then I use it for the footrest when I'm watching Netflix.
So is this the form that you bend all the stuff around?
This is the form, then you trim it up either with hand tools. I did it at home with hand tools, but it's easy in the shop. Easy in the shop, couple of holes drilled in it, and then the upholstery materials pulled around to the other side. And yeah. The veneer is a wonderful veneer used a lot for curved work, and particularly concrete forms and stuff. It's 1/8 inch Italian poplar plywood, and it's very, very flexible. It's paper-backed mahogany veneer. There's a couple of different suppliers from it. I think I got some from Mr. Plywood. It's a little overpriced, but it's pretty good. The next thing down on the, if people are not aware of. Okay, sure, yeah. I have one form, but it goes pretty well. I also can do it with people. A couple of people have come to my house and just done it in the garage. I do it for a cost of materials. If people are not aware of it, Woodworker West magazine is a terrific way to stay in touch with the world of woodworking from Denver to Hawaii. They do all kinds of stuff with shows and classes and stuff like that. Highly recommend it. There's some books that have come my way lately. I don't know if anyone is aware of Nancy, which way shows it here? Nancy Hiller is a tremendous furniture maker in Bloomington, Indiana. She's a blessing to the field. She has a master's degree in creative writing. She's about 50, and she's turned out some wonderful work. And if you are at all doing kitchen cabinet work for a traditional house, the old style Portland houses, this book of hers called Kitchen Think is just, it's plowing all new ground in something that takes you completely away from the IKEA style of cabinet stuff. It's a transition between the Hoosier cabinets, which were the first cabinets into houses, and then this style, and then, IKEA. Another one of her books that she's just done is Making Things Work. And it's a series of essays about her process as she's working. She's actually under a death sentence. She has pancreatic cancer, and they have kept her alive for 1.5 years now, which is very, very long for that kind of illness. And she has written for Lost Art Press and also for Fine Woodworking. She wrote a phenomenal essay in Fine Woodworking entitled Working Through Pain, which is amazing. 2 other books that have come our way is Joinery, Joists, and Gender, and it's about the history of women in woodworking. Just been published by Deidre Vischer out of England at Rutledge Press. And for those who do handwork, like Ruth and stuff does, you have Sloyd knife style work to make spoons and stuff with hand carved work. Apropos this, I'm proposing that the Guild bring from Maine, Lynette Breton, who is an expert teacher in the making of wooden spoons and bowls and stuff. And then the last thing, not to belabor this, I'm trying to look for ways that generate a little money for the Guild. So I have this idea that's kicking around that each month we would have a silent auction on the back. And the silent auction would be for surplus stuff that we all have, whether it's tools, hardware, lumber, or fixtures. So I brought examples, like here's a fitting jig for industrial style, medical office style hinges. And here's, a sample that was set up for a customer. Here's a box with a extra hinge in it. Somebody could have it for $1. And we would either, the guild would get either all the money or like half the money, however it would work out. Here's an example of something that's surplus for me right now, which is a 22-inch plane. It's polished on the bottom. It cuts beautifully. And I have with it a 30-year-old tungsten carbide blade from Germany, from Kunz. You can plane Formica with this. So this together would be like, I don't know, like a $200 item, sold for 100. Guild might get half, a maker get half, donator gets half, or the guild gets all the money. Man, we're trying to raise a lot of money. So that's an idea that might take off. And that's my little gig. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ed.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like the idea of bringing in our excess stuff and doing some, trading, auctioning here. I mean, all of us, one man's treasure is another man's junk, right? In that, or it's the other way around, I guess. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Wheaton. Glenn, you maybe want to spotlight him for a second. I did manage to yap for 25 minutes.
Yeah, I noticed that. Thank you.
So the show is all yours, Joe,
Okay.
for our speaker.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ed, for that. Tonight we're going to have Larry White and his mentee. I'm going to call her a mentee, and Lauren Vertigo. And as you may know, I have had several people from the Maloof Foundation or the related to the Maloof Foundation as speakers. And this one, I think, is Larry is the culmination of that. Larry was Sam Maloof's first paid employee, and is an artist in his own right. So where Larry was the mentee of Sam Maloof, now Lauren Vertigo is Larry's mentee. So we have a kind of a direct line back to Sam Maloof with these two people. I have put up on the chat some of the websites that that you can look at to see some of their work that's in addition to what we're going to see tonight. I will also make sure that these get out in a weekly blast that Bland puts out. So for those of you who are sitting there, then you don't have to worry about trying to write these down, or even if you can see them. But anyway, I went through this presentation with Larry today, and Larry and Lauren today, and it's going to be fantastic. And I think with that said, I'm going to turn it over to them. For the people who are on Zoom, can you put your questions in the chat, and I will try to ask them as we go along. For the people who are there, maybe ask them of Ed, and Ed, you can just kind of jump in when if there's a question that needs to be that needs to be asked, and we'll just see how that goes. I think it's going to go great. This is going to be a lot of fun. Larry and Lauren, I'm going to have you guys pop in here. Good to see you guys. You're still muted. Perfect. Now you're looking good. And welcome. If you could maybe just do a little bit of an introduction about yourselves, and kind of, where are you right now, I guess, is we'll start with that. And then tell us a little bit about yourselves that I have, because I just hit the surface, and then we'll share the screen and do our show.
Awesome. Okay. Can everybody see us and hear us? I hope so.
The Zoom people can, so, okay.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the Guild for asking me to be a participant in this. I'm always happy to share what we do at Maloof, and share my own work as well. And this time it's a special treat because I have Lauren Verdugo, my apprentice or assistant, who has become a fearsome woodworker in her own right. And so we'll talk about that towards the end. First of all, I was Sam's first paid employee. I joined him in 1962 as a 19-year-old art student, and I was studying drawing, painting, majoring in ceramics when I got the call at the university or at the school to go down and visit Sam and possibly go to work for him. That was a pivotal point in my life, meeting Sam and becoming his lifelong friend and learning from him. And it was a tremendous experience. I don't need to say that. Currently, I live in the high desert in Southern California, which is just north of Yucca Valley, about 12 miles up in the high country. I live at 4,600 feet. High desert, we're right at snow line. It's a beautiful place to live and work, and I'm really happy that I can be there. I thought with this presentation, it would be a good idea to really feature the mentoring aspect of our craft and in the art world. When Sam came out of the military service in the late 40s or mid to late 40s, he took a job with Millard Sheets, who was a really famous, well-known painter in Southern California, who also was the head of the graduate school at Scripps College in Claremont, California. And Sam began working with Millard. Sam was a gifted graphic artist and really skilled in lettering and painting. And working with Millard, he was able to develop his skills even further. And Millard basically introduced him to woodworking. He had him do hand-carved frames for his paintings. And Millard liked the rustic furniture from Mexico and had Sam start building some of those pieces for his own home. He also took Sam into his house and home and made him part of the family, which was an important thing. He was a tremendous influence in Sam's life and a long life friend. So the reason I wanted to talk about that is when I went to work for Sam, he basically did the same thing. I became a family member. And while I worked for him, I became married. I had 2 daughters. We lived right on the property in the Lemon Grove. And we shared the family experience of Christmas, birthdays, and those kind of things. And so working for Sam was not like working for an employee. It was like working and helping a really good friend. And I think that's really important in what we're going to present tonight. Lauren Verdugo is my apprentice now, and she joined me in 2017, straight out of her AA degree in art history, was it?
No, it was art. Yeah, it was arts and humanities. It was the most generic thing, so I could get a transfer.
Yeah.
And then I started working for Larry for about 3 years straight, while also working at Maloof, which I have worked at Maloof since 2012. But only started kind of doing woodworking in 2016 when I fell into one of his women's workshops for veterans, and someone had dropped out last minute. So that was how I got involved.
So I knew Lauren had a lot of energy. I'd seen her around as a young teen docent at Maloof. And so I talked to the director and asked if she could join that program. And she just excelled tremendously in a 3-day workshop and went home with a nice tall stool. And that set her off on her woodworking obsession right there. And so anyway, when she joined me, she was exposed to a lot of different kinds of things that I do because I work in many different media. And we'll talk about that later. But I think what I want to do right now is start our program. And let's jump back to 1962. These first photographs are me with Sam. As you can see, Sam was quite a fearsome looking young man, the age of 46 when I joined him. I love, back up.
Yeah.
I love this slide because it shows the beginnings of the very first low back to Sam's left with the curved arm. This was the first mutation of his original design, and that grew into one of his most iconic designs in furniture. Next one. You skipped one.
That was weird.
Well,
There we
this is
go.
just another look at the kind of construction we were involved with. These chairs were upholstered. Everything Sam made at that point was upholstered, and everything was hand sanded. He had no machines. We only had a half sheet sander for doing tabletops. Everything else was all hand sanded. And so that's where I paid my dues. So this shot here is a shot of Sam on the left with his son Slyman and Paul Vicente in the back, two of my good friends. This was the crew that was working in the late 60s with Sam. And the shot on the right is typical of the kind of furniture we were making in the early 60s. I was actually present at this shot, and it was so dark that I couldn't believe they were even getting an image. But this photographer was just absolutely amazing. And it was out on the tree rows near the shop. While I was doing woodworking, learning with Sam, I also established a metal welding studio next door where we rented. And so I was doing ceramics work, I was doing welded steel sculpture, and I was also starting to experiment with making hardwood pieces, which I hadn't had any experience. This is one of the first ones that I did. And if you look at the end cap on it, that textured area in there are cutoffs from Sam's arms. When he cut the arms out, he cut the front of the tip of the arm off, and I liked the shape, so I decided to use them in some of my pieces. Okay. This is the shop at the Malou Foundation in Altaloma, where we moved to our new site. Probably most of you have heard that Sam had to move his compound in 1999 and 2001. A freeway went right through his property, and we had to move to a new site up near the foothills. And this is his historic home, which is now a museum, relocated on the new site. This is looking into our shaping area. You see the beautiful garden art there. Sam loved these old machineries and things and had them around the property. You see a beautiful rocker through the window.
Yeah.
And here's some detail of what those rockers look like. An idea of the kind of shaping that went into creating these pieces. One of these rockers would take us about 3.5 weeks to make. Straight ahead. Go ahead. Here I wanted to juxtapose a walnut rocker with a zirconia rocker, which is the dark, heavy, dense wood on the right, and some detailed shots of that. It's just a gorgeous material, very difficult to shape and work, but fairly easy to sand. But when you get done, the reward is amazing. The grain is so beautiful. This is a piece that I made while I was with the corporation after Sam passed away. Okay. Classic 50s design of Sam for the woven seat, a real classic form. He made many, many of these throughout the years. Here's a reproduction of a cork coffee table, also a design from the 50s. Sam worked extensively with cork throughout the 50s and into the early 60s. The legs are turned on a lathe with a stem at the end that pierces the table with a wedge through it and a spline over it. That became a classic Malou signature joint. Go ahead.
Oh, Larry, could you go back one, Lauren?
Yeah.
So that joint we see that looks like a tenon on above the leg, that's actually part of the leg, is that right?
It's part of the leg. It's turned on a lathe with creating a dowel at the top of the leg.
Okay, got it.
And that pierces the table.
Yeah.
And then there's a wedge in it with a spline over the top.
Yeah, I see it.
As a decorative element to cover the wedge. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. This is the classic low back chair of Sam's that he developed over 40 years. This is the only design he perfected where he thought he didn't have to change it any longer. He was totally satisfied with it. The rocking chair, he never stopped tweaking it. He was always fussing with it, always changing subtle little details. But this was just reached a point where it couldn't be improved on, really. These are some detail shots of the kind of shaping that goes into one of these. This is about a 2.5 week operation to build one of these.
And these are all hand sanded too, is that right?
No. Later on, we had the little Rockwell quarter sheet sanders with a
Okay,
1-inch thick pad on it
yeah,
for doing the rounded surfaces. And then towards the end, we used Dynabrade random orbitals. And Sam is a self-taught woodworker. He taught himself how to do stuff. And so we didn't really work in a lot of traditional ways in the shop. The goal was to create a piece as fast as possible with the largest, best amount of aesthetic and quality you could produce. And so we used air tools with burrs on them to get rid of the bulk of the material. But you'll see some slides coming up that give you an idea of what they look like when they're being produced. But we went in with sanders, and between the grits on the random orbitals, we would hand sand in between to get rid of any subtle facets that would be in there. And so it was a long process to do that. All the shaping was done after the grinding with the burrs. The shaping was done with the classic Nicholson 49 rasp, and everything was done with that. And we had a lot of other rasp, more refined rasp, but basically the workhorse was that Nicholson wood rasp. This is a low back double wide. It's the settee, a beautiful form. This is a music stand I made with the corporation after Sam left. His design, classic design that he developed in the probably late 70s. Right. This is a view of our shop, the shaping room. This is actually Building J. It's an assembly room, and we're one of the guys did refinishing and that kind of thing. So we have a series of chairs in progress here. This is an idea of how the seats are put together and the joinery is progressing. And you see the legs stacked on top that are just blanked out with the first notches cut in.
I love the cup of walnut dust there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys see the cup of walnut dust, but that's how you repair everything here. So
gotcha. Oh, right, that's the
Okay.
secret sauce. Yeah.
Here's a bunch of them walking through the door to get shaped. If you look at the joinery here, you'll see that it's quite bulky and just big chunks glued together. That's how we would receive them from Sam. And then we would proceed from that point to do all the refining and shaping and sanding before the back and arms were put on. Here's another shot of that progress of developing these forms.
leave everything heavy before you start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey, Lauren, could you go back one other slide to that one? Because I think, Larry, you had told me earlier that seat is actually made up of 3 different pieces of wood.
It's 5 pieces.
5
When
pieces. Okay.
Sam originally started in the early 70s using a hardwood seat. And when he first did them, they were flat seats. So the joinery didn't really matter in terms of laying out the seat and with the center beak and everything. But when he started doing the pre-curved seat, they had to be developed in symmetrical units so that we would have a centerpiece that was about 4 5/8 inches wide. And then the next 2 pieces on each side would have to be the same width. And then the outside pieces would have to be the same width as each other. But it wasn't a determined width. It could be narrower or wider. They just had to be the same. And that was to create the symmetry that you needed to get the curved seat.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so you kind of see the shaping, the pre-shaping that's gone on in the seat. Normally we would glue up the center pieces, the first 3 pieces, And then while they were drying, we would work on the joinery on the two outside pieces. And once that was done, then we would glue those onto the seat, and then it was ready for carving at that point. The reason we did that is it's easier to glue it up or clamp it up if you're doing it in the first 3 and then adding the 2 on the edge. You get a tighter, cleaner joint that way. This would be a typical tree delivery. Sam, on occasion, would buy a whole tree up in Chico and have it shipped down, and then we'd build it basically an open crate around it and let it dry for 3 years in the parking lot. They were just beautiful Claro slabs. And it was always exciting to get one of those delivered to the property. This would be a typical succession of work where we're making a set of furniture for a client, and we finished the host and hostess chairs, and the rest of them behind are in progress of being sanded and finished. I wound up specializing in cradles for Sam, and over the years I think I made 9 of them for him. The most tedious process in building a piece of furniture for Sam. These took 6 weeks of just straight ahead work. The ribs are not steam bent. They were bent in a 2-piece mold with 1/16 inch laminate walnut, 5 of them for each rib. And then we would line the mold with thin cardboard to take up any slack as we pressed them together. And that way we got absolutely perfect joinery. But this kind of gives you an idea of the process of building one. And here I'm cutting off the top stems. You'll notice that the top of the cradle is a compound arc. It arcs down and also outward. Here's one nearly finished where the sanding is almost complete. And the inside of that basket has to be hand sanded because we couldn't get machines in there to do it without destroying the edge of the rib. And so they were really a tedious piece to do, but so beautiful when they got done. You see the one on the left has been freshly oiled, and we'll go through the process and then get delivered. Actually, Joe, you asked me a question earlier in the day about how it was suspended. If you look at the top arc where the trestle comes up and bends into the cradle, right in the center, there's a seam there. And so on the outside edge, there would be a threaded insert in the trestle. And then I would put a 1/4 inch bronze sleeve bearing in the opposite side where a 1/4 inch machine screw would go through with a very thin spacer between the two, which would tighten it up and then plug the head of the bolt on the inside. That made sure that the integrity of the joint was not disturbed by the movement of the cradle from the threads.
Yeah, because when I first saw those this afternoon when we were doing this, I couldn't figure out how the thing rocked.
Right.
It's a tiny slit there where that I can see it now. Yeah.
You can see
It's
just
very-
barely the 2 tones here.
Yeah,
Right.
It's a beautiful movement. It's really great. And you should see those babies doing loops in it. So let's talk about the freeway that went through Sam's property. When it was decided that they were going to build it, he had to move to a new site. It's a very long, complicated story, but they picked out a site. They started preparing the land. But before that, I spent 4 months making this model with Sam of the new house they said they would build for him, because when they decided to do that, I guess I should give you a little background on that. It's important. The state of California couldn't spend money on an individual. So Sam had to form a foundation to create an entity that they could spend public money on. So when he formed the foundation, his home became a historic residence and museum, which meant he was basically homeless. So the idea was that they would agree to build him a new structure of his design. And so this is the house that Sam designed, and I built the model with him over that period of 4 months. And this model is huge. It's 5 feet by 9 feet on the platform. And I built it in a large scale so Sam could get down and actually look inside it. Because he's so visual, he had to be able to see the relationships of things, not in the abstract, to look at it in real time and real space. And that was a successful event. If you look on the right side here, there's a little sculpture that I built and put in for the landscaping because Sam always had art around the outside and inside his home. Okay.
Just Larry's so detailed. You can see a little Porsche like car in the garage.
Oh,
Anyway.
right. Yeah.
So anyway, years later, 15 years later, when we moved to the new site, a number of buildings were not moved. They were dismantled, and we saved the timbers from the buildings. And at one point I acquired those after Sam had passed away. And I wanted to use those timbers to create sculpture, and you'll see some more pieces down the road. But this is a full-scale reproduction of that model, the little sculpture I made for the model, which exists on the property now. And these are made from timbers that were salvaged from the demolished buildings. Right. This is a beautiful view of the house from the north looking south. Here's Sam at the age of 92, starting a series of 3 brand new designs that he had never made before. And he did these right out of his head, no drawings for this one. Mike Johnson, my co-worker here, actually built the pieces, shaped them, and finished them for Sam. Sam was getting quite feeble, but because he was designing it in real time, he had to test drive it to check the balance and everything. And we set him up and put him in there so he could see how it rocked. Go ahead. And this is the finished piece, which is just phenomenal.
Wow.
Piece. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
It's in Beverly Malouth's collection now. And go ahead. At the same time, the next piece he decided to build was this occasional chair. And he actually did a few little sketches for it, but the piece didn't quite turn out like he had sketched it. But here again, all the aesthetics were designed in real time. And go ahead. And this is the finished piece, just gorgeous piece.
Mhm.
And throughout Sam's career, he used Jacqueline Larson fabric exclusively. And this is a great example of a multi-tone fabric and the way Sam used it. A few months later, after he completed that piece, Sam passed away in 2009. Both of those pieces were made for a retrospective at the Riverside Museum of Art, and as a beautiful show. And so Sam left us at this time. He had formed a foundation, a corporation, so that the business could continue and we could continue to make his designs. And that's what we did. And it's still going on. Mike Johnson actually owns the business now and is making Sam's designs. I retired from the corporation in January of 2014. I had already turned 70 and I wanted to get back into my own studio. After Sam left us, Mike and I decided that we would like to reintroduce designs from the 50s because of the interest in mid-century design. And so we started researching, borrowing original pieces and recreating them as best as we could. And these are some examples of that period. Go ahead. You'll notice the orange sofa before. Basically what we decided was to take this beautiful chair and extend it out in 3 bays to make the sofa. And Mike made that. The hall tree on the right is a piece that I designed for the corporation based on the client's desire within the Maloof aesthetic. This was my all-time favorite chair of Sam's. When I came to work for him in '62, this is one of the first pieces I saw, and it just struck me as such a beautiful piece. And I decided to make 2 of them. I did this one here with the black leather, and then I did another one, which I don't have a slide of, in a brilliant Larson yellow, lemon yellow fabric. That was just an awesome piece. I was so taken that I decided to design a rocking chair based on that, and I called it the fan back rocker. And rather than use turn spindles, I used bandsaw spindles, but from the front, they were shaped to look like a turn spindle, but they were ergonomic, and so they were extremely comfortable. And one of our board members bought it before I got it finished, so I didn't get a prototype. But I've always wanted to take this a step further. Anyway, it turned out to be a beautiful rocker.
There you go, Lauren. There's a task for you.
Pardon?
There's a task for Lauren. Yeah.
So this is an interesting piece here as well, because a client who was the daughter of people that I worked on the original furniture back in the 60s came to us in 2010 or 11, somewhere, maybe 13, somewhere in there, and wanted us to rebuild a cork dining table that she used to eat at Sam's Place. It was his table. She wanted one for her collection, and she wanted dining chairs to go with it. So we decided to base it on the original design from the 60s, 50s, and 60s dining chair. But there again, instead of doing turn spindles, I did the ergonomic spindles, and we decided to use the solid seat rather than upholstery, and with the new joinery and update the look. But basically, it's based on that original design from the 60s. Okay, this is me. I worked with Sam for 7 years. I left in 1969 and went to Cal State Fullerton in the art department there and took a job there. After 7 years there, I moved to Santa Cruz. And by that time, I built a bit of a career for myself and was doing woodworking in Santa Cruz. After 4 years, I took a job at UC Santa Cruz in the sculpture department, and I worked there for 4 years. But this is the kind of work I was doing while I was in there. And whoa, we're jumping back in time. This is 1973 was my first rocker, made out of solid sides and very sculpted arms, which don't show up much. I didn't have a really good camera, but I like this image with the moon behind it.
Mm-hmm.
This would be typical of the kind of design I was doing. This is a Koa library stool. Go ahead. These are some dining chairs I did for a client out of Koa and Brazilian rosewood and ebony. This shows how they're very sculptural. And if you look in the back of the chair on the right, you'll see that there's a soft butterfly across the joint with a medallion inlaid in. And that was typical of the kind of work I was doing at that time. Rosewood music stand from that period.
Is that the one that I refinished recently?
It was, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, Brazilian rosewood. And then aside from those more serious pieces that I was doing, I was always playing around with forms and testing my ability to do different things. This fun pair of scissors on the side was a Christmas gift for my daughter. It's about 16 inches long. It's very large, out of redwood. And then the wing top on the other side, the other slide, is just me having fun, doing something different.
Yeah, I love the shoe.
Go ahead.
So whimsical.
So during the mid 80s to late 80s, I started a series of ebony vessels. These are about 12 inches high. And originally they were covered forms. They were boxes with lids. But I had a piece in Carmel in one of the galleries, and I walked in there one day, and a man walked in the door, walked over to it and picked it up, turned it upside down and said, "Is this a radio?" And it dumped the lids on the carpet. And I was looking at it and I went, I'm going to glue the lids on. And I don't like hardware. So I just decided to just go totally sculptural. So these serve a visual presence. They're not a functional object. But if you look on the right, with every piece, I put some kind of little vent or little grate in it where you got a sense of the inside of the piece, so it didn't look just like a solid block of wood. Here's me playing with some really delicate joinery, and also with various woods, using them graphically as an aesthetic element. This is actually poplar. That last one was a wood called Paldeo from New Guinea. This is actually poplar with a mineral stain in it and these 3 little floating Buddhas that I liked. And so I just sliced 2 thin pieces and separated them, not like a book match, but just one behind the other on the other side of the vessel. So when you looked at each side of the piece, you saw the same image. Another use of Paldeo on the front of this piece for its graphic quality. And this was another non-functional sculptural piece. And if you look at the bottom of the piece all the way around, you'll see a black 1/8 inch or less black line. That's all ebony that's been laid in there to line that piece.
That's good. That's a beautiful touch.
This is a set that I made for a client, long-term client of mine down in Long Beach, California, with bird's eye maple, an armoire and a chest of drawers, and bloodwood. Next one. This shows some of the detail work at the bottom and the sides on the inlaid decorative inlay in the center. I had a brief undertaking in the early 90s of wanting to do some work that was more production oriented, but I wanted to use production elements, but I wanted the pieces to be one of a kind. So this was an experimental piece. And I don't know if you can see it in the slide, but the top and all the inlay and the juxtaposition of all the pieces in there implies a lot of movement. It's all out of Kimbo, the whole thing. It was a really nice piece, but it wasn't very happy when I moved to the desert. For those of you, you see those X joints in there, and they moved around a bit. Go ahead. In 1992, I rejoined Sam in Alta Loma. And when I did that, I had a lot of free time at night, so I went back into my clay production, and these are some raku pieces that I began making during that period, throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. One of my drawings from that period, go ahead.
Sam owns this one.
Oh, that's in Sam's collection, yeah.
Oh, there's.
Here's my political statement. Go ahead. And these are examples of wax patina and wood-fired pieces. I got away from using glazes, and I just like the raw clay when it was fired in with wood or salt or charcoal. It really appealed to me. Go ahead. This is another charcoal piece. It's about 12 inches tall. It's in Beverly Malouf's collection.
Nice.
Keep going. In 2013, I had a show lined up in Pomona at a large gallery, and I'd had a bunch of eye surgery, and I was having trouble seeing. I had to get work done for that show, so I started working in clay, and I found that I had double vision. I decided maybe I would try drawing, and same problem. So I had Sumi ink and some big brushes, and I decided to do a painting show. And so this is a result of my efforts for that show. This is the kind of work that I really love doing, and I do it periodically. Usually I'll just stop everything else and do a whole series of these and then move on to something else. Using Sumi inks and stains, acrylics, that kind of thing. Go ahead. More work from that period. Go ahead. This is a detail of one of my clay torsos.
Love this piece. Yeah.
Where I got away from using, I decided not to do any more high firing. So I would bisque fire pieces at a lower temperature. And then I used different colored wax patinas to develop the surface on these pieces. Go ahead. This is another one from that period.
Nice.
This is an interesting piece. At Malouf, when we were gluing up things, especially when we're doing like maybe 8 seats in a row, we use rollers and glue with little rollers to roll the glue on so it'll go on fast and won't set up. And then when we are through, we roll the glue out on boards to clean the roller and then take it and wash it. And this particular is one of the glue boards that I would roll glue out on. And there's probably about 6 or 7 years of glue on this board. And they were so beautiful in tone and quality and texture that I decided to start using them for artwork. So, this is a functional piece. It's a letterbox for my adopted niece in Alaska out of Clairol walnut. And she grew up on the in Tutka Bay, and we used to go pick mussels off the cliffs when the tide was down. And so I did this little scenario for her with a tidal pool on top, and then the lid is on the right of it and just lifts out. There's no hinges or anything. It's locked in there. I made the mussels out of ebony, and the zirconi kind of mimics the limestone on the cliffs, and I used black nylon rope unwound to create the little hairs that grow along with the mussels. And I was quite happy with that piece.
That's a beautiful piece.
This was a series of mixed media work that I did for a number of years called the Horizon series. And if you look on the piece on the right down low, you'll see that there's a little drawing there of the mesas in where I live. And they're made with black basaltic clay. There's black gesso. There's a lot of different material, walnut frames, Baltic birch tops with, I used a guitar toner to get that beautiful color. And I did a series of about 20 of these. And they were all addressing the way our land is abused out where I live in the desert. Many people come out and don't really appreciate the serenity and the beauty of it. And so these pieces with the captured birds kind of was my expression about that. Go ahead. This is another one from that series where I've used Baltic birch plywood with a faux rust finish on it and the basaltic black clay. That's the color of the clay. It's not stained or glazed. And I also did some real furniture. So this was for one of my long-term clients. In fact, I made these for the same client I made the armoire and chest of drawers for, the bird's eye maple, made out of a really beautiful marble walnut that I actually bought from Northwest Timber in Oregon. Beautiful pieces of wood I got for these pieces. At Maloof a number of years ago, I don't know the exact date, we started doing a veterans program in October where I created pieces that could be made in 3 days by people with no woodworking experience. This was the first model for that workshop. And so we take 5 veterans with PTSD and bring them in for the weekend, and they would make this piece and go home on Sunday with it finished. And it was a wonderful program. And we've continued doing it until COVID, and last year we couldn't do it. This is one of my clients saw that piece and wanted me to make a teak bench for their room outside their shower. And so this is an adaptation of the original design. Let's get back to mixed media art. If you look at these pieces, the walnut is Clairol walnut from Northern California. And I used it as a topography map. I wanted it to reflect like a topo map. Mm-hmm. And then the toned plywood implies the desert. The one on the left, the night blooming cereus, is actually green poplar. That's the color of the wood that I sculpted those elements out of. And the one on the right is using the basaltic clay again and bloodwood for the base on each of them. And so this was a period when I decided I would try some more desert motifs. And I wasn't really into that kind of imagery, but I really had fun making these pieces. Go ahead. And those pieces grew into other things. And then I got into a period of where I was laying up layers of paper, glass, tinted plywood, faux finishes, where the elements of the pieces are tucked in and pass through the frame. I'm still playing around with these ideas. This was a mixed media piece where I was using photographs I'd taken. This was a shadow of my wife actually on concrete and over a bronze grate. I tweaked it in Photoshop and made a t-shirt transfer out of it and then printed it on aluminum. This led to a whole series of work. Oh, go ahead. This is another one in that series where I'm mixing aluminum, acrylic paint, hardwood, bloodwood, and the images that I printed on aluminum. And that's an image of Dee's mother that I used in this piece. Go ahead. More in the same series where they're layered up. Really playing with subtle detail is what I wanted. Go ahead. Now we're jumping to my place out in the desert where I live. This is another one of the beam pieces where I'm using salvaged wood from the Maloof move in conjunction with found objects and steel plate and objects that I collect out in the desert and from friends. This is another way of working. The Arboretum asked a group of artists to come and pick up wood that had been either died or blown over in the windstorms or died from disease, the drought or disease. And we could come in and pick up any kind of wood we wanted and then make pieces for an auction they had to raise money for the replanting trees. And so this was some sequoia that I got and used for this table. And the next one was a beautiful oak limbs that I got. And I carved through the bark down to the interior of the wood. And then I diluted glue and painted the bark with glue and other things to stabilize it from coming off.
This
And,
is just like
this is one of my favorite pieces.
So
Yeah,
did you? Yes, it's one of mine too. It's so that you diluted the glue. Is that just like white wood glue, or was it?
It was type on.
Type
And,
on.
and so I just thinned it out and just layered it up in there to solidify the bark. And then of course it got linseed oil and it got Maloof oil over the top of it.
Okay.
But this is the way I like working really. This is welded steel tube with fasteners and some of the connectors are old swivel chair parts. And it's just a lot of fun for me. It's what I like doing. Back to the Maloof, I was continuing to develop new ideas for benches that I can do in workshops there. And the one on the right is far too complicated for a 3-day week. And the other one turned out to be complicated too. I was playing with producing a piece where people could play with learning how to do the Maloof joinery, leg joints. And I thought by just having two, it would move faster, but by adding the trestle and the brace, we still couldn't get it done in 3 days. So I've kind of taken those off the list. Go ahead. This is the way I like to design furniture. I really had a good time making this piece for a friend of mine who was a client. And this is the first upholstered piece I've done myself. Not that I did the upholstery, but it's the first chair I designed with upholstery on
With
it.
upholstery,
Yeah, right. And so you can see the inlays and the back brace going across. And
that went back to a previous chair that you'd done earlier that you showed us where you have those are the sides of that chair. Can you go back one, Lauren? Is that solid wood? That's solid
yeah,
wood.
that's solid walnut
Oh,
with
gotcha.
with a wingy foot underneath it along the floor
Oh, of course, I see it
to
now.
harden it up.
Right,
And then there's wingy in the crossbar as a detail.
Okay.
Yeah. And then this is another use of the beams in the sculpture at my place. This is a piece out in the desert. And that concrete form is 8 foot long. And the way that piece happened was I had 2 slabs poured and I recalculated the concrete and figured out I had over a yard extra. So I quickly built this form Saturday and on Sunday and Monday. The pour was going to be on Tuesday morning. So I had to go like crazy to get it done and set and rebar in it and everything. And so it was a very spontaneous beginning for this piece. Then it sat there for 2 years while I was figuring out what to do with it. And ultimately I was able to use Maloof beam and a lot of the found objects I have. These pieces are all quasi-kinetic. I make them in a way so that the wind moves them around subtly. They're not mechanical, but the wind keeps them moving, so they have a very peaceful kind of motion to them when you're observing them. Another chair similar to the one we saw before. You notice at the bottom right photograph, there's I like using these inlaid lines as a motif and decorative element.
This matches one of their coffee tables and it looks amazing, which I wish we had that picture in here, but
Yeah. More large sculpture. This is a little more unusual in that I made templates for the steel plates and actually had them cut with a water jet CNC. It's the first time I had done that, and I like the process a lot because it gave me some really clean, clear cuts. This is about 10 feet tall and 7 feet wide or so and 3 feet deep. That's a large piece.
Mhm.
This is a model for another piece that I built that I haven't made, and I'm not sure I will, but the model turned out really beautiful in and of itself. The last series I've been working on for the last 2 years is what I call a random X furniture. And so I'm working off these X patterns, and these are 2 tables. The one is 24-inch square on the left with Wingy and Clairol walnut. The one on the right, surprisingly enough, is all Baltic birch plywood with some detail pieces and then a faux finish, faux rust finish put on it.
How do you make that finish? Is that just dyes or?
No, it's a really cool finish. It's there's a really heavy primer that goes on first, and then you come back in with a pigment laden or iron laden pigment. It's a paint that's full of iron particles, and as you're putting it on, you have an activator that you can activate it as you're working with it. There's a learning curve with it. It took me a while to really figure out how to use it. And one of the things that triggered that was when I first tried it, it was in the autumn during monsoonal season, and there were big thunder cells coming through. And I had tested it outside of my shop, and it wasn't working. I was really upset about it because it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And then one of these storms opened up and these giant raindrops started coming down. And so I ran outside and grabbed it and brought it inside, and I looked, and everywhere there was a raindrop, it was bright rust red. And I went, acid rain, there's the key. So I set out buckets and bottles and collected rain for the next few storms, which I have now still. And I use those as an accelerator as well. It works great.
It's a stunning piece.
Even after I know that he does all that, I still work with him. So
All right, you gotcha.
So here's another example of working with aluminum, Wingy, and faux rust panels. There's 8 panels on this piece. And I call it my Zinside Out chair because the inside has many layers of material, which are all Baltic birch of different thicknesses. And then the outside is very peaceful and quiet. And these slides don't really do it justice, but it's a really beautiful piece. I like it.
yeah, there's aluminum in there you can't really see, but that's what's between the Wengy and
yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, back to the artwork. I was invited to do a show at the Ontario Museum of Art related to Maloof, and Mike Johnson and I had a body of work in the one museum where they had an exhibit of Sam's work in another museum. And here again, this piece was an homage to the kind of disrespect to my environment and the way people mistreat it. The faux rust just represents a subtle decay. And the piece wasn't working for me at all. And one morning I woke up and I thought of those ducks in the shooting galleries at carnivals. And I went, it's just perfect, the perfect image for this piece. It's about 4 feet by 5 feet. It's quite large.
The ducks make the piece. I mean,
Yeah, it really just put it over the top.
yeah.
And this is an example of the kind of work I'm doing right now, basically for gallery sales. Small random X tables with glass and different elements. This is a departure in that I'm starting to use urban woods that have been reclaimed from cities where they go in and a tree gets blown over or dies of disease. So the piece on the right is made from liquid amber and ironbark eucalyptus. And then the red ring is a bloodwood. But the liquid amber was a beautiful grain pattern, and the ironbark is just like steel. But the density of the wood is a problem. It's quite soft, the liquid amber, but it was really beautiful. I wanted to try it out. Go ahead. This is a chair that I designed specifically at Maloof for a client. I started doing personal tutorials. This was a client that wanted to spend a week with me building a chair. And so my policy there is I don't do Maloof designs at all. And I'm not licensed to do that. And so I designed this chair within the Maloof aesthetic to give someone the experience of what it's like to work in that mode. And so we spent actually 6 days working on a piece, which, as it turned out, he wasn't quite truthful with his skill level, and I wound up making a lot of that.
I see the medallion appears again.
Yeah, and see, that's throwback to my vessel days in the 80s.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So the other aspect of what I started talking about at the beginning of this presentation was the fact that Sam was my mentor. He basically adopted me. And as I said, I was part of that family early on. He was a very kind individual, and he wasn't really terrific at teaching me things, but I learned by observing, looking over his shoulder. And so it was a crucial point in my life because he exposed me to the life I was going to have. He exposed me to a kind of life that I never knew existed before I met him. And I'm talking about not only learning useful skills, but a lifestyle in a way that you can relate to your environment and your surroundings in a really profound way. And on the right, we have Lauren, and she joined me in 2017 to begin to learn the things that I know, and I was passing those things on to her that I had developed through my own practice over the years. And so that whole sequence of learning, training yourself, discovering things, and then passing it on is a crucial thing in our culture. I think it's getting lost in so many ways. And so that's why I decided to really feature it this time. So I want to, in just a few short years, what, 3 years or so?
It was like,
Lauren
like 3 years.
was off like a rocket making her own work. And so let's look at some of your things.
Yeah.
Oh, we still got some of mine?
Yeah. Well, this is like getting into what we were doing.
Well,
I don't know
yeah.
if you noticed, but all of Larry's work more recently has gotten really big, and that was because he had help. So that's.
Yeah, and so she's a great assistant, helped me a lot during this process. Go ahead.
Also, it's just really funny to see what their faces do when they see us walking into a metal supply shop.
Well, these pieces here are also made with recycled Maloof beam material. And I chose this shot on the right because it's sitting down slope from the historic house now where it sits at the new compound. And the piece is made from parts of the buildings that were dismantled at the old site. And so, go ahead. And this is it installed out at my home in the desert. And well, after Lauren had been working with me for a couple of years.
Mhm.
Here I am in the shop, cutting up a half pipe to make forms for a memorial I was designing and building for my good friend who'd passed away, the office manager at Maloof. And then we have Lauren on the other slide, learning how to work metal, learning how to weld, learning how to grind and polish and do all those things. Go ahead.
So the half pipe there, is that plywood that you're?
Yeah, they're plywood forms you can buy in all radiuses, sizes, and there was a place called Anderson International in Tustin, California. Unfortunately, COVID brought about their demise. They're out of business now, which is really sad. But they had just beautiful forms you could purchase and utilize, for different things.
Wow.
Here's Lauren learning woodworking. She's standing on that chair we saw earlier. And she's also learning how to do some of my clay pieces that I do. So she's very versatile herself.
She's just like you. No, yeah.
And here is the memorial right after we cast the concrete. We did a single pour with a crew of men who knew what they were doing. And so we're just dismantling the form now. The forms there was no flat surfaces on the uprights. They were all curved surfaces. And what I did was build the bronze plaque out of clay, fired it, took it to a foundry, had them cast it in bronze. And then the upper pieces of metal there are Corten steel because I wanted it to rust out the same color as the buildings, which are all rough sawn redwood with a dark red brown patina on it. And so this was after completion. The idea was to have this memorial with the chime on it, the bell, which would ring every now and then. We don't get a lot of breeze there, but when it rang, you would think of Roz, and it works very well.
It's like a Japanese kind of bell, isn't it? Or
yeah,
It sounds like one.
It's a low tone, a very low tone. Yeah. And so, go ahead.
This is some of what I have been doing recently. The two pieces on the left I made while I was at San Diego State. I basically worked for Larry after I got my associates, between Maloof and here with Larry. And then we decided that we can't just get up and I can't just go teach based on me telling people that I worked with Larry. Like he did with Sam. So
who's that?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So luckily, and I blame that it's not you, it's that everyone needs a piece of paper now. So I went to San Diego State, and that was that. I had 3 semesters of just straight up COVID stuff. So that was really lame. So I didn't get to make anything for like about 1.5 years during that time. Because we didn't have studio access at school. So anyway, the stuff on the right are things that I've made since I graduated. I graduated last May.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. Even during COVID, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, applying design is really weird during COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's more of what I make. That is a real large book. It's bound newsprint that was used for reference at the Laverne Public Library way back.
I love the waterfall edges that you use here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so all of this here is that, saved, rescued lumber that we get from Street Tree Revival in Anaheim, California. The trees on the right, which that's the same piece, but I've made a few of them. That's Torrey Pine, and then and Torrey Pine is very dense. It's native really only to San Diego region out of all the pines there are.
Oh my.
So
yeah, I've never seen it or heard of it before.
Yeah.
Before you mentioned it today. Yeah.
The only way you can access it, because it is a protected species, is that it has to be either dying or dead. And that's why it has all those color zones from the fungus in it.
Right.
Yeah. And this is Indian rosewood on top, and the sides and center stretcher are liquid amber, just like how Larry was using that too.
So when you say liquid amber, my first thought was that it was like amber, like of the jewelry.
Well, it's the name of a tree in Southern California.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's a random decorative tree that
they use it. A lot of cities use it as a decorative tree.
What is happening in California is a lot of our water is getting extra salty. And a lot of these trees cannot handle salty, salinated water.
Right.
And so all of them are dying. So there's an abundance of dead and dying trees that they're rescuing to turn into lumber. And they all pretty much have fungus and interesting things going on in them, but they're safe to bring in your home because they're kiln dried.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, here's Larry doing demos. We originally started this wood barn program in 2018, the year before I went back to state. And so Larry's here on the left, just doing a demo in the more upgraded shop. More recently, on the right, we have one of my stools that I teach a women's workshop too. And so that's what that is next to Larry's bench, sycamore bench. And then he can jump in.
So here we're at Street Tree Revival in Anaheim, California, where we buy this recycled lumber and urban trees. And I'm sorting through spalted sycamore here, which I've started using for my bench projects. Simply because walnut has gotten so horribly expensive that we just can't use it anymore in our workshops. We don't have that kind of budget. And so the next shot over here is me talking with John, one of the owners, about this lumber, and it's all kiln dried. It's beautiful stuff, very stable. And so we're just gradually moving into using that kind of material. Here's an example of how it looks when it's finished. It's just gorgeous stuff. And this is one of my first classes that I had using that material. We do these workshops at Maloof. I try to do one a month. During COVID, basically we had to shut down. And so during those months, the first months of COVID, what I did was start doing a series of video tours of the house called Deep House with Larry White, and they're like 5-6 minute videos on YouTube that explore some of the furniture and some of the elements inside the historic residence.
Yeah, I put the link up on in the chat, and I'll make sure that Bland puts it out next week to those
Great.
Deep House.
Great.
Yeah,
So here's Lauren's workshop. You can talk about it's her women's workshop.
Yeah, so we got the grant in 2020, but we all know what happened in 2020. So we had to push it back and then push it back and then push it back again. So after I graduated, like last June, I think it was, or was it last June?
I think so,
Holy
yeah.
cow. Yeah, it was only that far away. And so this started a bunch of workshops doing these stools for not just women, but teens and things as it progressed. And these are students at Allied Woodshop, where I also teach in LA. It's on the 10th floor of the Allied Craft Building in the middle of the Garment District. So, there's like a bunch of street vendors down there and all that stuff. That the view is gorgeous, but getting the wood up there is something else. Yeah, so the classes I teach at Allied are more foundational, where these people are coming in, twice a week for 8 weeks to learn all the fundamentals on how to build a side table. At Maloof, Larry and I teach classes that are 2 to 3 days because of just our size. But Larry's going to be teaching some classes at Allied too soon. This is more of that urban lumber on the right. This is elm right here. And all these goobers, these boys were really excited to make them. They wanted silly shots. So we had, they're high school students.
Right.
They're fun. This is Larry just giving one of his longer tours to a group of craftspeople from Allied Woodshop. They're like residents and things like that. So
And this is inside the Maloof house, right?
yeah.
Right. This is Sam's well-known spiral staircase in Alfreda's old studio. And if you look at the stained glass above the door, if you look at it from the outside, it says Alfreda on it with wood in between.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. And right now we have an interesting project. In 1955, Sam made this occasional chair for my ceramics instructor then at Chaffee College. And about a month ago, his sons approached us about refinishing the piece after all those years, and it needed some help. And so we're in the process of refinishing and reupholstering it for Tony's sons after all these years.
It's what's been hiding behind Larry's head this entire presentation. That's behind us.
Right.
But that's all,
But
folks.
anyway, that's it. I would like to add at the end that it's really been fun doing this presentation. And we are currently getting ready to develop the calendar for the fall sessions of the workshops. And for anybody who's interested in those classes, anything going on there, you can contact the Maloof Foundation website, and it has the information on there about upcoming events. And we'd love to see any of you down for a tour in Southern California, if you can make it down there. And
well, thanks for including that. Because I think that there may be some of our people who would be interested in following up with some of the things you guys are doing down there. I found this to be a very inspirational, and looking at not only the wood, the furniture pieces, but using different media to create and to express yourself. And then of course the wood stuff is the furniture is just astounding. So I found it very very inspiring. I really appreciate your time and work you guys put in on this presentation and the work you've done here. I haven't had a lot of questions but if there's anybody who has a question, feel free to bring it up right now. And is there any questions at the live audience there?
Questions from the live audience? I think it was pretty thorough, and I think we all enjoyed it. Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah, it was inspiring. Thank you very much. Lauren, I'm gonna want you back. We talked earlier that you were gonna go to Japan, and I think, next year I'd really like to see you do a presentation for us where you can show us what you learned in Japan, and I want to see more of your stuff.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for
thanks,
letting me
everybody.
be a part of this with Larry.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's really
Well,
great.
we'll be in touch. So thank you very much. And with that, have a good night. So.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Lauren.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Any final comments from the house here? We do need to put away the chairs. I know we came in and they thought we were coming in couples, but they would like us to put the chairs away. So before you go, if you could each grab 2 or 3, that would be great. I want to thank John and Ruth for this show and tell. I would encourage everybody to bring something next month for our show and tell. I thought what we had tonight was fascinating. So I hope all of you are doing exciting things. I would remind you all to consider the Guild in your donations, and good night. Thank you.